All right. Hello. Welcome to another Trek Talk livecast. Now, this is going to be the wrap up for season one. So, how I'll do this is I'll be doing some reading from Mark Cushman's book. These are the voyages, and read about how the show was generally being received and some of the particularly how the merchandising around the show was growing towards the end of the first season, which had good and bad sides to it. Then I'll go ahead and get into the tiers, and let me see if I can bring that up. Come on, and then we'll get into the tiers, and I'll just start doing a ranking on the tiers. And also, if anyone in the chat wants to join in, that will be fine. In fact, why don't I'll put yeah, I can put that in the chat. Can I do that? Okay. And anyone who wants to sound off on any particular episodes, they can certainly join me in here and do that. And then once we've graded all the episodes, I'll just do a quick little wrap up. I'll talk about how Star Trek was received as far as the Emmys, like the Emmys and any other acclaim they got. And that'll kind of be it. All right. So let me go ahead and get rid of that. This back up. Okay. And I also wanted to where is that? I wanted to put up a particular cover of TV Guide. It's the one that's got Kirk and Spock, and it's kind of like looking up at the camera. It's a really cool shot. But I tell you, I can't find the darn thing. I guess this will do. Let me see here. So, can I bring that up? No. Okay. All right. Hail at Mark Harkness. Good to see you, sir. I don't think remember you being here before, but thank you for stopping by. It's good to have you here. All right. So let's just go ahead and get into this now. So the final episode of the first season, Operation Annihilate, that aired on April 13th, 1967. Now, back when the show had premiered with the Man Trap back in the previous September 66, Star Trek had received mixed reviews. Now, the critics were appraising or were reappraising the series. TV columnists referred to it as good science fiction with great special effects and an exciting futuristic adventure that keeps watchers on the edge of their seats, according to TV Guide. In their May 20th, 1967 issue, they wrote, quote, "We would say that the show we most over-criticized was Star Trek. Lately, we've enjoyed and admired much in the series." And hello, GSR. Quote, I actually like all of season one, even alternative factor. Even the alternative factor. Okay. All right, a die-hard fan. I'm not overly fond of the alternative factor myself. During season one, cast members of Star Trek appeared on the cover of TV Guide, Ebony, TV Week, TV Showtime, TV Star Parade, TV Radio Mirror, the St. Louis Dispatch, TV Magazine, the Boston Sunday Herald TV Magazine, Model Car and Science Magazine, TV Star Annual, among many others. And let's see if I can bring up. There. See if I can bring that up. That weren't. There we go. And also, that's one example. Then we've also got. Uh, let me. Here it is. Okay. And then Nichelle Nichols, she was on the cover of Ebony. By the time the first Star Trek episode, or by the time Star Trek was repeating the best episodes of its first season, the tabloids were picking up on the appeal of the series and its stars, prompting scores of articles in the likes of 16 magazine and TV movie screen. Shatner was either shown as a macho riding motorcycles and hunting with a bow and arrow, or as the image of the perfect dad visiting an amusement park and going horseback riding with his three daughters. Oh, so he was into horseback riding even back then, huh? Nimoy sans the pointed ears, but always with his Spock bangs, was shown reading poetry or being analyzed in articles like "How's a man with pointed ears? How a man with pointed ears feels deep down." Star Trek was good copy, and the floodgates had just opened. Daily Variety, for its February 8th, 1967 issue, reported that AB Sales International, representing Desilu, had sold Star Trek to 28 foreign countries and that the series had been dubbed into 4 languages so far. And Mark Harkness says, so ironic that CBS refused even a pilot for Star Trek, but now they get the money. Yeah, yeah, the whole way it wound up with CBS is just so screwy. And it's been clearly just a disastrous development for the franchise. Although I don't know, honestly, with the state of Hollywood, if they had wound up with another network like NBC or ABC, it probably would have been the same crap. Especially ABC, because I think Disney owns ABC now. This was a notable success for a series less than a year old, and this was just one of numerous revenue sources which were already paying into the studio and Roddenberry Productions. Another was merchandising. Just in time for Christmas 1966, the first Star Trek tie ins materialized on shelves in toy stores across the United States. Ideal Toys, one of the big four, along with Marx, Mattel, and Rimco, had made its fortune creating the teddy bear. And now it released the Star Trek board game, which I've got a image of that, I believe. I don't know why that image cracks me up. First of all, it looks nothing like Spock, other than he's got pointed ears. But I don't know. I just like the look on Kirk's face, and he's pointing. He's like, "Yep, that's a spaceship, all right." Rimco was doing well with their tie-in products based on television programs and popular singing groups such as the Beatles, and a battery-driven, 1-foot-tall replica of the robot from Lost in Space. The best Rimco would do with Star Trek was the Astro Cruiser with movable cannon. Let me try and find that. Star Trek Astro Cruiser. Let's see what that looks like. Trek Astro Cruiser. Is that it? Oh, yeah, that sucks. Let's put a picture of this up. Yeah, that's like a dodgy tie-in at best. Let me bring that up. Yeah, there it is. Look at that. What the heck is even that? And then also the Star Trek Astro helmet with tinted visor. So let me see if I can find that thing. I think I remember that thing vaguely. Oh no, 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 that is not it. That's not what I remember. Okay, let's bring that up. It looks like something a Sleestack would wear from Land of the Lost. And there was also an Astrobuzz ray gun. Hasbro, makers of 1952's Mr. Potato Head and 1964's G.I. Joe, went for the fast buck with the Star Trek paint by numbers kit. In early 1967, AMT took the lead with the crowning glory of the various Star Trek merchandising ploys at the time. In the first 6 months alone, the model kit of the USS Enterprise sold a staggering 100,000 units. I wonder if I can bring up an image of the original. There's been plenty of Star Trek models over the years. Let me see. AMT. Enterprise T16 67. Okay, is that? I was hoping to find an image of the original packaging. Would that be it? Maybe. That looks like, yeah, it looks like it. Or, well, no, that's some kind of reproduction. It's probably the closest I'm going to find, so we'll go with that. And Mark Harkness says, we got 100,000 we made from the last sci-fi series leftovers, slap Star Trek on these puppies and move them out. Well, actually, that's not the case. In my the live stream I did covering what was Galileo 7, I believe. Actually, AMT was one of the first companies that came to Star Trek for merchandising because they saw right away the potential in selling models for the Enterprise. And what they did is they struck a deal with Desilu Studios where they got the rights to do Star Trek models or models of the Enterprise. And in return, AMT basically paid for the shuttlecraft, both the model and the full-sized mock-up. Oh, you meant the helmets. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, in that case, yeah, that's God knows where that came from. But yeah, so AMT actually paid for the shuttlecraft to be built for the show. That's why it didn't appear until that episode. Let's see. All right, in June 1967, Bantam published the first Star Trek paperback. And I believe I have an image of that. Where, yeah, there it is. And this was actually a novelization or short story adaptations of the various episodes. These weren't original stories. Science fiction author James Blish, who had won a Hugo Award for 1959's A Case of Conscience, was hired to convert the series' screenplays into short stories. Since work of this sort was usually delegated to pulp fiction hacks, Roddenberry believed they had struck literary gold by getting James Blish. And in the summer of 1967, Western Publishing, best known for its Gold Key comics and Little Golden Books, introduced the Star Trek comic book line. And I do remember I actually had a couple of issues of the old Gold Key comics when I was a kid. Those are long since lost, though. Okay, there we go. And Mark Harkness says ANT kit was used on screen for the USS Constellation. Oh, was it? I didn't know that. Or did I? Maybe I did hear that at some point. I'm not sure. Okay. So the story in the first issue of the comic, a planet was populated by intelligent and carnivorous vegetation, had been on the drawing board so long that it prominently featured Yeoman Rand, even though she had long since left the show. All the merchandising meant good news for Star Trek's lead cast members. Every time Kirk and Spock had their images printed on a toy package, a paperback book, or a comic, there was a royalty paid to Shatner and Nimoy. Desilu and Roddenberry, of course, made money too. Another financial windfall came with the release of Mr. Spock's Music from Outer Space. Let me bring that up. There it is. Another fan. Where is this? Yeah, so in December of 1966, Dot Records, a subsidiary of Paramount Pictures, approached Herb Solow with the idea of distributing a Star Trek themed album. Solo immediately sent a memo to his colleagues saying, quote, I think we should pursue any record company that wants to do an outer space or Vulcan single record or album, be it straight dramatic music, weird music, Nichelle Nichols singing, Bill Shatner doing bird calls, or even the sound of Roddenberry polishing a semi precious stone on his grinder. Roddenberry apparently had some kind of a hobby with collecting rocks, collecting stones. I think I'd mentioned that before. A deal was quickly struck and a music producer was chosen. Charles Greene, a composer and arranger who had found success with disposable yet popular novelty fares such as I've Got a Lovely Bunch of Coconuts. Greene was assigned the task of creating something on which the kids would squander 250, the going rate for an LP record. But Greene wasn't interested in Nichelle Nichols singing or Shatner doing bird calls. He had his eye and his ear fixed on another member of the Star Trek family. Shat or no Nimoy. So Leonard Nimoy said that Charles Greene had a teenage daughter who was a big fan of Mr. Spock, apparently. And she told him, well, if you're going to do an album of music from Star Trek, then Mr. Spock should be on the album. Herb Solo expressed concern over Nimoy's involvement in a December 14, 1966 memo to Roddenberry and the Desilu legal reps. He wrote, regarding Leonard Nimoy, I imagine we have our standard deal with him and can convey it to Dot Records. If not, I would hope that we would have some pressure on Alex Brewis, Nimoy's agent, not to dampen any interest in our deal by trying to price his client out of the Dot Records business. Brewis played ball and Nimoy signed on, and it was good business all around. Roddenberry wrote to Solo on December 1966, saying, quote, in the matter of the Leonard Nimoy album, since it will undoubtedly contain something of the Star Trek theme, I would expect to receive a royalty. And since Mr. Spock is a creation of mine, maintained against some odds, I would like to have some voice in the nature and direction of this album, nor do I feel that a special arrangement with myself and Norway Corporation on profits from the album would be out of order. Norway Corporation was, of course, just another way of saying Gene Roddenberry. The liner notes on the album, Green Assembled, with Nimoy's enthusiastic support, described its content as kicky and mod. Because, Mr. Spock was with it. Arrangements of popular songs like Music to Watch Space Girls By, and a hip adaptation of the theme to Star Trek. Beyond Antares, written by William Hatch, with Gene Coon's original song, which Uhura sang in the episode The Conscience of the King, was also presented as a haunting and lovely instrumental. Nimoy talked his way through Alien, a spoken word piece explaining the nature of a Vulcan, and Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Earth, a somewhat amusing poem set to space music, which was also co-wrote. What is space music exactly? I wonder. Alexander Courage received the songwriting credit for Where No Man Has Gone Before, a 2.5 minute track made of the music heard under Shatner's Space, the Final Frontier narration. And then Nimoy sang You Are Not Alone, written for the album by a colleague of Green's, which was a perfect fit for the alienated Spock. The album closed with A Visit to a Sad Planet, co written by Green. Set to suspenseful cinematic music, it was a spoken word piece about the Enterprise coming across a dying planet, documented by the ship's log. The people of this world annihilated themselves through nuclear war. And a surprise ending, the planet turns out to be Earth. Pleased by the results and even quite surprised, Charles Green wrote to Ed Pearlstein on March 2nd, 1967, admitting the Leonard Nimoy album turned out much better than I expected. The music critic for Variety found the album to be better than expected as well. With Mr. Spock on the front cover holding a 3-foot model of the Enterprise featured in Tomorrow Is Yesterday, the record was not going to escape the attention of Star Trek's fans. It entered the Billboard album charts on June 10th, 1967, and remained there for an impressive 25 weeks, selling steadily well through the Christmas buying season. Even the track selected as the album's single, A Visit to a Sad Planet, made the charts. Mr. Spock's music from outer space was intended to be a one-time event. However, before the end of the year, Dot was happy to sign Nimoy to a long-term contract. And I'm guessing that's probably where we got Bilbo Baggins. Bilbo Baggins. Now, the success of the latest Star Trek tie-in caused ill feelings between series composer Alexander Courage and Gene Roddenberry. Courage wrote the music for the theme to Star Trek featured on the album as an instrumental, but to his way of thinking had been forced into sharing credit and even more importantly the royalties with Roddenberry, who had dashed off a lyric for the song. Robert Justman said, quote, "People are people. They have their good points and their bad points, and there were certain things that Gene did. Well, he was in financial need and he saw a way to get some quick money," unquote. Yeah, Gene was always in financial need, wasn't he? Courage said, quote, "I think I have a right to be bitter. It turns out there was a clause in my contract which had been supplied to Roddenberry by his attorney to the effect that if a lyric was ever written by Roddenberry to the theme I wrote, whether it was ever used or not, Roddenberry would share in my royalties. So Roddenberry wrote a lyric, presented it to me and announced that he would from then on participate in my royalties." Robert Chessman said, "Owing to the royalty issue, it's no wonder Sandy Courage lost all enthusiasm for the series and liking for Gene Roddenberry." Okay. All right. I'm going to pause there on the reading for now, and we'll turn to this right at the end, right quick. But let's go ahead and get into the tier ranking. So let me this up. All right. And I did put the link to the live stream in the chat if anyone wants to come in and voice an opinion on a particular episode. Okay. So I guess we'll just go ahead and start off with where no man has gone before. Of course, the second pilot that was made in the show that wound up leading to the show going to series. And I'll just put it there for the moment. It's not going to stay there. And so what the Enterprise encounters an energy barrier at the edge of the galaxy. Subsequently, Gary Mitchell, Kirk's friend, uh, becomes develops godlike powers, goes insane, and Kirk winds up having to kill his friend in order to save the ship. A pretty solid episode overall, I think. Obviously, at this point, they were still kind of figuring out what the show was, and some things would change. I do think that you can make an argument that the conclusion with the big dust up at the end between Kirk and Mitchell is a bit on the cheesy side, but I like it well enough. And I think we'll just go ahead and give this a B to start off. And Harkness says, "I have a face for radio and a voice for print." Okay, so I guess, and these aren't going to be in any particular order. I'm just kind of go by the order they're in here at the bottom. So next is the Man Trap. Okay, so in the Man Trap, the Enterprise crew encounters a salt vampire that takes on the guise of Dr. McCoy's old flame. I forget her name. And it's it was actually the first episode that had McCoy in it, although of course it wasn't actually the first episode that, or well, it was the first episode that was aired, but it wasn't. It was like the fifth one produced, I believe. So overall, I don't know. What do we think? A C for Mantrap? I mean, it's a solid episode. I don't think it's great. And it's also, I think, kind of is not quite, again, they really were still kind of figuring out what Nancy. Okay, yeah, right, Nancy. And they really still weren't quite figuring out we're still figuring out what Star Trek was, because once the creature is revealed, Kirk really is just kind of determined to kill the creature, and get rid of it. There isn't really much attempt to try and understand the creature, and try to, and being more compassionate, and the way you would expect Star Trek to be. And I think part of that, of course, there's also really not much lamenting. I mean, there's a little bit right at the end about killing this thing when it seems to be the last of its kind, the last of its species. So I guess we'll leave it in C unless anyone wants to disagree. Okay, the conscience of the king. So Captain Kirk is convinced that an actor who's a member of this performing company named Anton Caridian is actually Kodos the Executioner, a man who committed a massacre on a colony world where Kirk was living as a young boy many, many years before, and who escaped punishment, who was believed to be dead. And Kirk is determined to expose Caridian and see that justice is done. Again, a pretty solid episode. I wouldn't call it a great one. Um, I don't know. I'm thinking C, really, but I could be argued into a B. So I guess I'll leave it at C for now. C for conscience. Okay. Then next, the Dagger of the Mind. And this is an episode that, there are several episodes that kind of fit this formula where they come to a planet and there's someone on this world who's Kirk knows, or at least knows of and greatly admires. There's a number of episodes like this. And they go down to this world, and of course it turns out this person is actually up to no good. This is a perfect one. We've got this scientist who's very skilled, or got these revolutionary techniques in rehabilitation of prisoners. But it turns out that he's basically kind of performing mind control on people. He's got this machine that kind of brainwashes you, and eventually tries to brainwash Kirk. Again, this is one I think could be a B or a C, but I'll err on B. I think it's a pretty good one. The villain is really kind of a creep. He really comes across as a jerk. Okay. All right. Now, next we got one of the big ones, at least for me, Arena. And as I said in my live stream about that episode, this was the first episode I ever saw. When I was a kid, I was probably 7 or 8 years old and saw this episode. So it's a personal favorite of mine, although I will admit that this episode has not aged well. The action, the fighting between Kirk and the Gorn has become something of a point, kind of a joke, and a subject of parody in a number of ways. But I still love it anyway. You could probably make an argument for A because it's so iconic in terms of the Gorn being an iconic creature and the whole fight between Kirk and the Gorn. But I'll go ahead and give it a B, I guess, unless someone else, again, wants to argue with me on that one. And Mark Harkness says, conscious of the king, off screen, there's a young angry Klingon that Kirk interrupted Shakespeare by tucking in the audience. Okay. You have not heard Shakespeare until you've seen it in the original Klingon. Okay. Next. Oh, okay. Alternative factor. Um, Honestly, I'm going to give alternative factor an F. Screw it. I just think this episode's bad. There's really just no redeeming quality to it in my side. And when I did the live stream on this episode, I mean, there are reasons for it. You know, there are some reasons why this episode turned out the way it is. But look, the episode is, you know, it's that doesn't change my grade. It doesn't change my grade. This is an F. This is the only F in the first season, though. Okay. What do we got next? Okay. Now we got a good one. The Enemy Within. A transporter accident splits Captain Kirk into an evil and a good Kirk. This is one of the greatest episodes in Star Trek, period. Just a classic. And you know, it's an A. It's an A plus. I don't see any way anyone would think that it isn't. So I'm just going to go ahead and put it there. If you want to argue with me on it, you can, but you're probably not going to change my mind. All right. The Squire of Gothos. Okay. And this one, they come to a planet where they encounter a mysterious alien named Trelane, who seems to have various powers to control matter and energy, who imprisons them and wants them to entertain him or keep him occupied. And this is another great classic episode. I'll give this one an A. And of course, this has been retconned so that Trelane is kind of a member of the Q continuum, I believe. That's never been officially acknowledged, I think, in any alpha canon, any of the shows or movies, but in novels, that certainly has been the case. Also features a great performance from William Campbell, I believe, isn't it his name? Who played Trelane. So yeah, that'll be an A. Next, This Side of Paradise. And this is a fun one. They come to a planet where radiation should have killed these colonists, but the colonists are alive. And of course, it's a bit of a mystery how they're not dead. Eventually, turns out there are these planets or these plants on the planet that release these spores that have kept them alive, but they also induce this sort of euphoric state in the people who uh, get infected with spores, and they want to bring down the entire Enterprise crew and keep them all there on the planet as well. This, of course, is a big Spock episode as he gets infected with the spores and then begins displaying emotions and has a romantic arc with the woman in the episode. Again, I forget her name. And yeah, I think we'll make this one an A. That's definitely a classic. Also a good one because it's an episode where Kirk really has to wrestle with his whole dedication to the Enterprise and his sort of almost obsession with the ship, you might say. Definitely a good one. Okay, and then Shore Leave. Kind of a similar episode in a way. They come to an idyllic world for some shore leave. Then, of course, all these various objects and creatures pop up and attack them and cause mischief. Dr. McCoy sees Alice in Wonderland and the White Rabbit. There's a knight. There's a tiger. There's the samurai and a fighter plane, et cetera, et cetera. Turns out the planet is actually an amusement park created by some aliens. Definitely a fun one. I don't know, A or B. Um, I don't know. I could make an argument for A or B. I'll probably lean to B, I guess. Okay. The Corbomite maneuver. And of course, this was the first episode done after Where No Man Has Gone Before and was supposed to be the first episode aired on television, but it wasn't aired in order because the delay in getting all the effects done on it. This is a pretty good episode. I think it does a good job of displaying what Star Trek is or what it's going to be, much more so than Where No Man Has Gone Before does. And certainly the Baylock head or puppet, whatever you want to call it, is iconic. You always saw it at the end of every episode there in the end credits. Um, is it an A or a B? I'll probably go ahead and give it a B. I could probably be argued into an A, but we'll go with B, I suppose. All right, court martial. Kirk is accused of, or even framed really, of killing one of his crewmen during an accident, and he has to prove his innocence. I'm not too crazy about this episode. I think in my live stream I talked about it. Particularly because the lawyer that Kirk hires is not very good. You know, he's supposed to be like this old crusty kind of dedicated to the law guy, but he really is kind of useless. He doesn't really do much of anything that helps. He's just sort of there being cantankerous for no particular reason. Um, I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and give it a C, I think. All right. Errand of Mercy. This is an important one, certainly. There's a dispute between the Klingons and the Federation over the planet of Organia. And the Enterprise is sent to Organia to secure an alliance with the Organians and establish a Federation presence there at pretty much any cost to prevent the Klingons from doing it. And the Klingons wind up in occupying the planet instead, and then Kirk and Spock have to try and defeat this occupation single-handedly without the Organians helping them. The Organians themselves seem to be just completely unconcerned about what's happening. And of course, there's a big surprise at the end when they're about to go to war and the Organians reveal themselves to be, another one of these godlike races of aliens who can manipulate matter and energy and all that. And it's important, particularly because it's the first episode with the Klingons, and it's also the Organian peace treaty, which is mentioned later down the line, becomes kind of an important plot point in some episodes. I'll give this one an A. And also, it's got John Colicos as Krug. I believe in his name Krug, the Klingon commander. He's really good. And Mark Harkness says the first appearance by Ron Howard's brother Clint in Corbomite Maneuver. Yes, yes, it is him. And oh, was it Core? Oh, I'm sorry. Core. Was it? Which one was Krug? Oh, well. And I remember seeing part of an interview with Clint Howard where he was talking about how he auditioned for one of the Star Wars movies. Now, I don't know which one it was, but he came into audition for one of the Star Wars films, and with the instant he walked in the room, George Lucas was there. And Lucas saw him and immediately went, aha, Baylock of the First Federation. You know, he clearly knew who it was. Krug. Okay, Krug was Star Trek. Oh, that must be why. Because I watched Star Trek 3 recently, so that's probably why his name was in my mind. But yeah, Core. Okay. Um. So what? Which one is next here? Return of the Archons. Okay. And this is another episode got kind of it's the first episode of a formula that will become popular where some of the crew beam down to a planet to explore it or study it or do something, and then they wind up being captured or go on the run and to prevent from being captured, and simultaneously there's some sort of threat to the Enterprise up in orbit, and then they have to not only kind of resolve their problem but also try and save the Enterprise too before it's destroyed. And of course, in this episode, they come to this planet, which is inhabited by people who worship and are controlled by an entity called Landru, who has created this kind of idyllic society. Although they do have this period every night where they all go berserk. And trying to think here, What should I give this one? I think it's a solid B. I'll go with that. Okay. All right, Charlie X. Again, one of the very early episodes, and this one's kind of an oddball in Star Trek episodes, at least in the first season. There aren't many like this where they bring on someone onto the ship and then this person becomes a threat and tries to take control of the ship and stuff like that. That becomes more of a trope later. But in the first season, there really isn't much of that. And the actor who plays Charlie, and again, his name escapes me. He is quite good in this. Um, I guess we'll give it a B. I think that'll work. All right, the menagerie. So I guess I'll go with part one first. And in this episode, Mr. Spock hijacks the Enterprise and takes it to the planet of Talos. Is it 4 or 5? Talos 5, I think, and which is a planet that is forbidden by, was it Starfleet General Order Number 1? No one is to approach Telos 5. And he's taking it there anyway, even though this will result in a court martial and possibly the death penalty. And he's doing this to help his former commander, Captain Pike, who had commanded the Enterprise before Captain Kirk, and who is now crippled due to an accident and is a paraplegic who is confined to a wheelchair and kept alive by a life support system. I'm going to go ahead and give the Menagerie Part 1 a B. Or I don't know, should it be an A? I could probably hear an argument for an A, but I'll go with B. And then part two. Now, part two is mostly really just rerunning footage from The Cage, the original episode, which I considered putting in here, but I wound up not doing that. And because of that, I don't rate it quite as highly as an episode in and of itself. But The Cage itself, if I had The Cage in here, I'd probably give it a B. So I don't know. I guess we'll put them together in the B column or B row rather. I think that works. Okay. Next, The Devil in the Dark. Okay, this is a good one. The Enterprise arrives at a mining colony where the miners are being attacked by a mysterious creature down in the lower tunnels. And Kirk and the Enterprise are called in to deal with the problem. Initially, they're looking to kill this creature, which it turns out is a subterranean rock-like creature called a Horta. And it turns out that the reason it is attacking the miners is because the miners have destroyed or are destroying the nursery down in the lower tunnels where these creatures keep their eggs. And it's just defending its young, and eventually they resolve it without killing the creature. And this one, it kind of highlights the difference between, or kind of where Star Trek had come from when the Man Trap was done, because this is what I was talking about earlier. There's no real attempt to try and understand the salt vampire, try to empathize with it, or understand why it's doing what it's doing. It's just like, let's kill this freaking thing. I will give this an A, definitely. Okay. All right. What are little girls made of? And this is another one of those episodes I mentioned where they come to a planet where there's a person on here that Kirk admires greatly, but then it turns out, of course, this person's up to no good. It turns out that this man, and it's Nurse Chapel's husband. What's his? I'm blanking on his name now. Okay, I'll have to look it up here. Corby, isn't that Corby? Richard Corby. I think that's it, Richard Corby. And it turns out that he has created a bunch of robotic androids, a bunch of androids to serve him on this planet using technology that was left over from a race that inhabited the planet long ago. And then it turns out that Corby himself is an android, and he is like cuckoo and out of his mind, and they have to deal with the threat he represents. It's okay, okay episode. Um, what do we want to put it? Again, I could go with B or C. I'll go with C, I guess. All right, next, The Naked Time. Again, this is another classic episode with a plot point. Something affects the minds of the crew and they all start acting weird. And this is a trope, of course, that Star Trek will come back to again and again over the years, most directly in The Naked Now, the TNG episode that basically has the same thing happening. Even with Data, who's an android, so it makes no sense, but whatever. So this one's definitely an A, in my opinion. Of course, it's got the classic scene where Sulu's chasing people through the hallways with a sword. We get Lieutenant Riley singing his Irish songs in the engineering section where he takes control of the ship, et cetera, et cetera. Just good stuff. And Mark Harkness says, difference from Mantrat and Devil in the Dark. When the Hoarder realizes she can communicate with the humans, she does. If the salt vampire had said, help me, I need salt, Kirk would have given it salt. Yeah, yeah, I guess maybe you could make that argument. Okay. I mean, and you wonder why they didn't just do that. Why didn't they just give it some salt? But whatever. Okay. A Taste of Armageddon. All right. So the Enterprise. Oh, but wait. Mark Harkness says the TNG Up Naked Now makes even less sense when you realize Data was affected and Riker is not. Yeah. Okay. So a Taste of Armageddon, the Enterprise comes to a planet where they wage war by computer, and the landing party as well as the Enterprise itself are designated as casualties, and the government of this world is determined to have them all executed as casualties of war. And this is a good example of the old trope of they come to a planet and then in Prime Directive be damned, Kirk's going to sort this crap out and set these people straight. um I think we'll give it a B. I'm tempted to give it an A, but we'll go with a B, I think. Okay, Balance of Terror. Now, this is one of the best. The Enterprise encounters a Romulan ship. The Romulans being a race of aliens that Earth had a war with about a century before, and they have to prevent the ship from getting back across the neutral zone. And of course, this is a hugely important episode. Introduces the Romulans, introduces the neutral zone, introduces cloaking devices. Also, I believe one of the first episodes that really kind of deals with the history that has taken place in this universe prior to the show. And kind of one of the first sort of lore episodes, I guess you'd call it. This one's an A, definitely an A plus, no doubt about it. Okay, Miri. So they come to a planet that is inhabited only by children. It seems to be kind of post-apocalyptic, and it turns out there was wasn't they? I think they were trying to create some kind of a immortality serum, I believe, but instead they wound up creating a virus, I think, that wiped everybody out except the children, and the children were made immortal and don't age, or at least they age very slowly. They age slowly. Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of this one for a couple of different reasons. I went into that in the live stream. I'm going to give this one a D. I'm just not a big fan of it. Okay. Um, Bounce a Terry, yeah, like a rating above A. I thought about, some of these, sometimes I'll see people doing these and they'll have what's called an S tier above A. And I thought about having that, but I don't know. It seems like you get into such a discussion of what qualifies it as an S episode or whatever. So I just decided to keep it simple. Okay. Next one. And speaking of a grade above A, Space Seed. The Enterprise encounters the USS Botany Bay floating in space. It's inhabited by a bunch of people who have been in cryogenic sleep since the late 20th century. Their leader is Khan Noonien Singh, a genetically enhanced Superman who then tries to take over the Enterprise because superior ability breeds superior ambition. This is an A, no doubt about it. All right. The Galileo 7. So who all was it? So we've got Kirk, McCoy, um, Scotty, I think Uhura. No, it's not Uhura. There's another yeoman, some other yeoman that's there, and then a couple other crewmen on the Galileo shuttlecraft, and they crash land on a planet, and then after survive and figure out how to repair the shuttlecraft and escape from this planet. And this is one of the first really Spock centric episodes. It's a great display of Spock's character, and just anyone that really focuses on Spock is always going to be really good. You could probably make an argument for a B on this one, but I just really, really like this episode, and I'm going to give it an A because of its emphasis on Spock and just the whole. I think it's got a pretty good, uh, just a pretty good plot, with the survival aspect. Although, admittedly, the monsters look terrible. Actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, yeah, I forgot about those creatures. We'll knock it down to a B because the creatures, the quote unquote giants, were so ugh. They look that has not aged well. Okay, Mudd's women. The Enterprise picks up Harry Mudd and three women who are basically brides for some miners or for people on distant colonies. They're mail order brides, basically. And he's taking them out there. The women have a strangely alluring effect on all the men in the crew. And it turns out that they take this thing called the Venus drug, which makes them more sexy and more desirable. Um, Again, I could make an argument for an A. In fact, I think I will. We'll just make it an A because it's got Harry Mudd in it, and Roger C. Carmel was so good as Harry Mudd. Yeah, we'll go ahead and give it an A. Why not? All right, tomorrow is yesterday. And this is one, well, really the first time travel episode in Star Trek. The Enterprise goes back in time to what was at the time, of course, the late 60s for scientific study or something. And they wind up being spotted by a plane. They inadvertently damage the plane, so they have to beam the pilot on board. And then, of course, they can't let him go back with knowledge of the Enterprise and the future. And, it just kind of snowballs into one kind of a time headache after another, after another. They learn that they can't keep him and take him back to the future with him because his son's going to be like the first guy to land on, was it Mars? I don't remember. He was going to be the first astronaut to Mars or something like that. So they have to let him go back, but then when they try to take him back, other people see him and blah, blah, blah. And it's also the first kind of overtly comedic episode of Star Trek that's kind of played largely for laughs. It's okay. I'm not a huge fan of it. And as I think I mentioned in the live stream, this is an interesting one because the original idea with this was the in Amok Time, in the episode Amok Time, of course, Lieutenant Riley had shut down like the warp core, and the Enterprise was spiraling down onto a planet, and they have to do a cold start of the warp engines, which has never been done and could destroy the ship, but they must risk it. And in the episode, what winds up happening is they wind up going about, I think it's like 3 days backward in time or something like that. But the original plan was that was going to be a 2-part episode, and tomorrow's episode, yesterday, that was going to be part 2 of that episode. But they wound up not doing it at the time, I think because of expense or because of time or something like that. So they wound up repurposing that script. Um, it's okay. I'll give it a C. I'm not a huge fan of it. Nothing wrong with it. Mark Harkness says Colonel Sean Jeffrey Christopher commanding the first Earth Saturn mission. Okay, Earth Saturn. All right. Okay. Where am I at? Almost at an hour. Okay. All right. Operation Annihilate. The Enterprise is trying to stop a wave of space madness that is passing through a sector of space. And the next planet in line is the planet Deneva, which also happens to be the planet where Kirk's brother and his family are stationed. They get there and discover that the madness has already infected the planet. Kirk's brother is dead, and his sister-in-law and nephew are both infected, as well as the rest of the planet. And then they discover that the cause of the madness is these bizarre sort of single-celled organisms, and one of them latches onto Spock and infects him basically, and he starts to go mad as well. They control their victims through inflicting intense pain by attaching to their nervous systems, and they're forcing the inhabitants to build spaceships so that they can spread to other worlds. And Kirk has the dilemma trying to figure out how to undo the madness, or he'll have to kill everybody on the planet. They eventually figure out that it's visible light. So then they test it on Spock. He winds up going blind, but then they do manage to save the colony and Spock. Fortunately, he gets better because he has an inner eyelid that protects him from bright light that he just never bothered to mention. It's like we tend to ignore it as you humans ignore your own appendix. Okay, Spock, like you have like an encyclopedic knowledge of science and history and all this other stuff, and you really forgot that you have an inner eyelid, and you couldn't have told us that. Yeah, sure, drama queen. I'm gonna give Operation Annihilate. I don't know. Should it be an A? Again, it's kind of a plot hole where they're really reckless with the testing. They tested on the creature and then they immediately just stick Spock in there. I don't know. I mean, personally, I love the episode, but I guess maybe a B would be more appropriate. We'll give it a B. All right, and then we come to the final episode, The City on the Edge of Forever. On a distant world, the Enterprise encounters fluctuations in the space-time continuum. They beam down to first, then McCoy accidentally gets injected with cordrazine, which drives him mad. He winds up beaming down to the planet. They chase after him, and on the planet, they encounter a bizarre structure which is sentient or intelligent and calls itself the Guardian of Forever. And it's a gateway into other times and realities. McCoy winds up jumping through it into the past. They then discover that McCoy has changed the past, stranding them on this planet with no Federation and no Enterprise. So then Kirk and Spock go through into the past as well to try and undo whatever it is or prevent whatever it is that McCoy has done. They wind up in 1930s America during the Great Depression. There they meet Edith Keeler, who is a charity worker who runs a sort of soup kitchen or halfway house for the poor. and she has these very strong beliefs and opinions about mankind having a great future. And it turns out that she was going to be killed in an auto accident, but McCoy saves her or was going to save her, and that is what changed history. So they wind up having to prevent McCoy from saving her and letting her die. And of course, Kirk along the way falls in love with her, so it's a very heart-wrenching dilemma for him. And as mentioned, when I did the live stream on that one, this is the only one to really win a Hugo Award. It also won a Writers Guild Award, although the Writers Guild Award was given to the original screenplay by Harlan Ellison and not the screenplay that was actually filmed. But this is a classic episode, of course. I think we'll go with A on that one. Okay. So what have we got? So A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so 10 episodes in the A tier. And this is what, 29 episodes. So roughly a third are A's. And then we got what, 10, 11, 12. So 12 are B's. So the majority B's in this first season. 5 C's, and then 1 D and an F. I don't know. I think that's a pretty fair arrangement there. If anyone has any or doesn't have any arguments about that, I think I'll leave it there. All right. So we'll wrap it up here. I'll just go back to Cushman's book here just right quick. So Star Trek's first nod for its excellence in production came from an unlikely source. The January issue of the Count Dracula Society newsletter. The Society voted a science fiction program, NBC's Star Trek, as the best television program of the year, deserving the 1967 television award for its high quality of fantasy and imagination. It even beat out Dark Shadows. The Emmys could not ignore Star Trek either, and that in itself was newsworthy. Science fiction had never been favored by the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. The Twilight Zone being the only exception nominated as Best Dramatic Series for one of its 5 seasons on CBS. Rod Serling also received 2 Emmys for Outstanding Writing and was nominated for a third, but other writers on the show, including Richard Matheson, Jerry Soule, and George Clayton Johnson, had been ignored, as were the directors and the composers and the set designers and makeup artists and the special effects and the guest actors. The Outer Limits was snubbed even worse. During its 2-year run, the series garnered only 1 nomination at the Emmys. Jack Poplin was considered in the category of Best Art Direction. All else involved with this stylistic series were, in the eyes of the Academy, unworthy of recognition. But things were changing. Leonard Nimoy recalled being at home with his wife on Monday, May 1st, when he received a telegram from the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. He was so surprised and overcome by the news that he joined his wife in doing a very un-Spock-like thing. He wept. Nimoy and Spock had been nominated for an Emmy. The actor later said, quote, "I thought, wow, what a thrill, particularly because the nominations are done by your fellow actors. And I thought, they're getting it. They can see what I'm doing. And it really moved me deeply." Nimoy's name showed up in the category of Best Supporting Dramatic Actor, competing against Leo G. Carroll for The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Eli Wallach for the dramatic special The Poppy is Also a Flower. The character NBC had originally wanted off the series was now acknowledged as a true contender. The biggest surprise regarded the biggest trophy. Star Trek, the most nominated science fiction series for a single year in the history of television, was being considered for the all-important category of Outstanding Dramatic Series, competing against I Spy, Run for Your Life, The Avengers, and Mission Impossible, which are pretty much all genre shows. That's interesting. No straight drama, like no medical drama or cop show or detective show or something. No legal drama like Perry Mason or anything. Win or lose, this was historic. No science fiction program had ever been nominated, let alone perceived as a best drama. The 19th annual Emmy Award ceremony took place on June 4th, 1967. It was an important night for Desilu. Star Trek entered the room with its 5 nominations. The Lucy Show had garnered 3, including one for the boss lady herself. Mission Impossible had 6. With these 3 shows, the little studio trying so hard to prove something to the industry had 14 nods from its peers. Even though Star Trek was not to go home a winner, this was nonetheless Desilu's night. Mission Impossible was the big winner, not just as outstanding dramatic series, but also for outstanding performance by an actress in a leading role in a dramatic series. Barbara Bain won that for Mission Impossible, outstanding writing achievement in drama, and outstanding achievements in film and sound editing. Really, it beat out Star Trek for sound editing? No other show had took home this many awards in 1967, and while the Lucy Show only won a single Emmy, it was the one that counted the most, at least to Lucy. She won the award for Best Actress in a Comedic Series. But Star Trek remained a strong contender. Despite this, though, it was in danger of being canceled. In the early summer of 67, A.C. Nielsen compiled a top 10 list of the highest rated series with teenagers between ages 12 and 17, the most desirable demographic for sponsors. Throughout the month of April during the network's sweeps period that year, and the shows ranked as follows. Number 1 was Bonanza. Number 2, The Beverly Hillbillies. 3, I Spy. 4, Gomer Pyle. 5, All-Star Basketball. It doesn't say NBA basketball, so I don't know. Was the NBA not around yet? 6, Family Affair. 7, The Thursday Night Movie. The Avengers was number 8. And Star Trek comes in at number 9. And 10 is Green Acres. Mission Impossible isn't on the list. That's interesting. One must wonder why a network would consider canceling a top 40 series that was almost always a solid second place in the ratings for its time slot and which often hit the number 1 spot. The answers and the most surprising Star Trek stories will follow when I continue the second season. And I'm guessing the main reason is just going to be the expense behind the show. As noted earlier, the show financially was in the red, and so was Mission Impossible. So Desilu financially was hurting despite all the success it was having. So where are we at? 1 minute 10. Okay, well, I guess that is gonna be it. Thank you to everyone who showed up for the stream. Please do like the stream and sub to the channel if you would before you leave. Let's see. So what's coming up? So I guess, yeah, 1 week from now, I guess we will plunge into season 2. And what else? I'll probably stream on Sunday night like I usually do. I am working on another video in my top 5 villains series. So I did a video, I guess it's getting close to 2 weeks ago, top 5 Marvel villains for Batman, the best Marvel villains for Batman if they were over at DC instead. And I'll be doing one for Superman next. Hopefully, I'll have that out by the end of the week. We'll see. And until then, thank you to everyone who showed up for the stream and those who will watch it on a rewatch. And I will catch y'all later. You all have a good night.